Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Romeo and Juliet, and today we get to hear from Juliet in Act 2, Scene 5. But since just yesterday we finished up Act 2, Scene 3, we got to fill in what happens in Act 2, Scene 4. So the stuff that had happened, Romeo and Juliet have decided that they're going to get married, and he was tasked with finding a priest, and then she was going to send somebody to him at 9 o'clock in the morning to find out where and when Juliet needs to go in order to get married. So Romeo went to Friar Lawrence, who gave him a lot of crap because he was in love with Rosalind like 10 minutes ago, and now he's in love with and wants to marry Juliet. But Friar Lawrence is like, okay, this could actually go a long way towards healing some of the wounds between these two families. So yes, I'll marry you too if you can figure out a way to both get here. And that was the end of Act 2, Scene 3. So Act 2, Scene 4 kicks off with Mercutio and Benvolio, who have woken up in the morning and they're still looking for Romeo. Because remember, after the Capulets party, Romeo jumped over the orchard wall and Benvolio thought that he had seen Romeo going that way. So he and Mercutio went there and tried to like yell and get him to come out, all that sort of thing. But Romeo didn't. So they went home to bed. But now they know that he didn't come home last night. So they're still wondering where he is. So there's some back and forth about that. And as they are talking back and forth about that, they find out that Tybalt has sent like a written challenge on Romeo's life, presumably because Romeo and his crew crashed the party at the Capulets, and Tybalt was very upset about this, but Lord Capulet prevented him from doing anything because he didn't want violence at the party. So they talk a little bit more about Tybalt and who Tybalt is and how deadly he is in a fight and all that sort of thing. And they're like, yeah, but Romeo will answer the challenge. We know he will, and that sort of thing. And then Romeo shows up and they're like, hey, where were you? And there's a lot of sexual innuendo that goes back and forth in this whole bit as they give him crap for not coming home last night. But then the nurse and her companion Peter show up and they make fun of the nurse quite a bit, or at least Benvolio and Mercutio do, until finally they leave. And she's rather upset with them and annoyed with them and that sort of thing. But having a chance to talk to Romeo, she's like, okay, so if you're messing around with Juliet, don't. If you're being honest, what's the deal? And Romeo says, tell Juliet that if she can get permission to go to confession, she should go to Friar Lawrence's cell today, this afternoon, and we'll get married. And the nurse is like, yay! And Romeo also says, you're going to go to this one other place and pick up a ladder, a rope ladder, so that it's easier for me to get into Juliet's bedroom. And the nurse is like, okay, cool. And then they all part ways, and that's the end of Act 2, Scene 4. So Act 2, Scene 5 starts out with Juliet, who's been waiting, and she says, the clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. In half an hour, she promised to return. Perchance she cannot meet him. That's not so. Oh, she is lame. Love's herald should be thoughts, which 10 times faster glides than the sun's beams, driving back shadows over lowering hills. Therefore, do nimble pinioned doves draw love, and therefore hath the wind swift Cupid wings. Now is the sun upon the highmost hill of the day's journey, and from 9 till 12, 3 long hours, yet she is not come. Had she affections and warm youthful blood, she would be as swift in motion as a ball. My words would bandy her to my sweet love, and his to me. But old folks, many fain as they were dead, unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead. Oh, God, she comes. Oh, honey nurse, what news? Hast thou met him? Send thy man away. So basically, Juliet is being impatient and a little bit ageist, is what this boils down to. What she's saying is she sent the nurse to meet Romeo at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the nurse said she'd be back by 9:30, but here it is noon, and the nurse hasn't come back yet. And so Juliet expresses a little bit of frustration with the fact that there's the travel time on either end of this message, which is one of those fun things when they make like a modern day Romeo and Juliet. They got to figure out a way that like they can't just be texting each other. Here's what's going on. But anyway, and then excuse me. And then she's like, it's been 3 hours, and if she wasn't so old and decrepit and ready to die, then she would move a lot faster and this whole thing would go a lot quicker. And then the nurse comes in and she's like, finally, you're here. What's going on? And the nurse, now remember, the nurse has good news and she's excited about this news. But she decides to play a little bit of a game with Juliet. She's like, oh, I'm so tired. Let me just sit down for a minute and catch my breath. And Juliet's like, okay, sit down. Now tell me the news. And she's like, oh, but I'm out of breath. And Juliet's like, but you have breath to tell me that you're out of breath. So come on, tell me the news. And then it's just like, oh, but I have a pain here and I have a pain here. And oh, my head. And this goes back and forth for a little while with the nurse just sort of milking it and trying to get, she's pushing Juliet's buttons, but it's always, to me, felt like the fun pushing of the buttons, not a malicious pushing of the buttons. But she does it enough that Juliet is finally like, please, I would take your bones if I could have your news. You could have my bones if I could have your news. Like, please, just tell me. Am I getting married today? And the nurse says, do you have permission to go to the confession? Juliet's like, yeah. She's like, well, then go, because that's where you're going to get married. So hooray. And Juliet's like, oh my God, I'm getting married. And the nurse says, yeah, now I got to go get a ladder. So get yourself ready to go to confession, and then you can go and get married. And Juliet is very relieved. They're all very happy. And yeah, that's the end of Act 2, Scene 5. And tomorrow we get into Act 2, Scene 6, which, take a guess what happens in this scene. I'm guessing that you can figure it out, given how linear this play is. But anyway, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow for that. Mwah.